The blizzard had come out of nowhere, transforming the West Texas landscape into a treacherous white hell. And when Asher Tanner spotted the dark shape crumpled in the snow just off the main road into Marfa, his first thought was that someone had abandoned a bundle of clothing. Then the bundle moved, just barely, and his heart seized in his chest as he realized it was a woman. Her traveling cloak spread around her like broken wings, her pale face already turning blue at the edges. He was off his horse before conscious thought took over, his boots crunching through the 6 inches of fresh powder that had fallen in the past 2 hours. December of 1882 had been brutal so far, but this storm was something else entirely. One of those rare West Texas blizzards that could kill a person in minutes if they were caught unprepared. The woman's eyes were closed, her lips parted slightly, her breathing so shallow he had to put his ear right up to her mouth to confirm she was still alive. Miss, can you hear me?" He shook her gently, then more firmly when she did not respond. Her skin was ice cold to the touch, and when he pulled back the edges of her cloak, he saw she was dressed for travel but not for this kind of weather. A simple wool dress, a thin shawl, boots that were already soaked through. No gloves, no proper winter coat. What the hell had she been thinking? Then he saw the carpetbag a few feet away, half buried in snow, and the pieces started coming together. Mail order bride. Had to be. Marfa was too small and too remote to attract many travelers, especially young women traveling alone. Someone must have been expecting her, waiting for her at the train depot or the stage stop, but she had never arrived. Maybe the stage had let her off at the wrong place. Maybe she had gotten confused in the storm. It did not matter now. What mattered was getting her warm before hypothermia claimed her completely. Asher scooped her up in his arms, surprised by how light she was, how fragile she felt against his chest. He had been riding back to his ranch after picking up supplies in town when the storm had hit, and he thanked God now for that timing. If he had been even 10 minutes later, she would have been dead, buried under the snow, not found until spring thaw. The thought made him hold her tighter as he lifted her onto his horse, then swung up behind her, cradling her body against his to share what warmth he had. His ranch was only 3 miles away, but in these conditions, it might as well have been 30. The wind howled around them, driving snow into his face until his cheeks burned with cold. His mare, a steady bay named Copper, pushed forward with her head down, trusting him to guide her when visibility dropped to almost nothing. The woman in his arms did not stir, her head lolling against his shoulder, and he found himself talking to her, urging her to hold on, promising her warmth and safety if she would just keep breathing. When the dark shape of his ranch house finally emerged from the white curtain of snow, relief flooded through him so powerfully his hands shook. He had built this place with his own 2 hands over the past 5 years, starting with nothing but the land his father had left him, and a stubborn determination to make something of himself. It was not fancy, just a sturdy 2-room cabin with a good fireplace and a barn big enough for 4 horses and a milk cow, but right now it looked like heaven itself. He half carried, half dragged the woman inside, kicking the door shut behind them against the wind. The fire had burned down to coals while he was gone, but it took him only minutes to stoke it back to life, feeding and kindling and then larger logs until flames leaped and danced. Heat began to fill the room, but the woman was still dangerously cold, her breathing more labored now, a terrible rattling sound coming from her chest. Asher had seen hypothermia before, had lost a ranch hand to it 3 winters back, when the man had been caught out checking fence lines during a cold snap. He knew the danger signs: knew that warming her too quickly could be as dangerous as leaving her cold. But he also knew she needed to get out of those wet clothes immediately, needed to be wrapped in blankets and warmed gradually. His hands hesitated at the buttons of her dress, propriety warring with necessity. Then he cursed under his breath and got to work. Her life was more important than her modesty, and there was no one else here to help. He worked as quickly and respectfully as he could, peeling away the wet layers of clothing, averting his eyes from what decency demanded he not see, wrapping her in every blanket he owned. Her undergarments he left in place, damp though they were, and he pulled on one of his own flannel shirts over her thin chemise for extra warmth. Once she was bundled near the fire, he heated water and filled his hot water bottles, tucking them around her carefully. Her face was still pale, her lips still blue, but after what felt like an eternity, color began to creep back into her cheeks. Her breathing eased, became deeper and more regular. She was not out of danger yet, but she was improving, and that was something. Asher sat back on his heels, suddenly exhausted, and really looked at her for the first time. She was beautiful, he realized with a start, in a delicate way that seemed entirely unsuited to the harsh Texas landscape. Her hair, spread out across his pillow, was a rich chestnut brown, thick and wavy. Her face was oval-shaped with high cheekbones and a small, determined chin. Even unconscious and half-frozen, there was something about her that drew the eye, made him want to keep looking. He wondered who she was, where she had come from, who she had been traveling to meet. Some man in Marfa was probably frantic with worry right now, wondering what had happened to his intended bride. Asher should ride into town, let folks know he had found her, but one glance at the window showed him that was impossible. The storm had intensified, snow piling against the glass, wind screaming like a living thing. No one was going anywhere tonight. He made coffee, thick and black and strong enough to strip paint, and sat in his chair near the fire watching her. His clothes were damp from the snow, so he changed into dry ones, hanging the wet things near the hearth to dry. He should try to get some sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw her the way she had looked in the snow, small and still and so close to death. So he stayed awake, keeping vigil, adding logs to the fire whenever it burned low, checking her breathing and her pulse, watching the slow return of life to her frozen body. Sometime near dawn, as the storm finally began to ease, her eyes fluttered open. They were green, he saw, a deep forest green that seemed to hold flecks of gold in the firelight. For a moment, she stared at him in confusion, her brow furrowing, and then awareness flooded her face and she tried to sit up, gasping. "Easy, easy now," he said, holding up his hands in a gesture meant to reassure. "You are safe. You are in my home. I found you in the snow yesterday evening, near frozen to death." She looked down at herself, at the blankets wrapped around her, at his shirt that hung loosely on her small frame, and he saw the moment she realized she was not wearing her own clothes. Color flooded her face, a deep crimson that spread from her cheeks down her neck. "I apologize for the liberty," he said quickly, "but your things were soaked through. You would have died if I had not gotten you warm. I was as respectful as I could be under the circumstances." She swallowed hard, her hand going to her throat in a nervous gesture. When she spoke, her voice was raspy, barely more than a whisper. "Thank you. You saved my life. What is your name, miss? And what in God's name were you doing out in a blizzard?" "Catherine," she said. "Catherine Owens. I was supposed to meet someone in Marfa, Mr. Samuel Hendricks. We have been corresponding for 6 months. He arranged for me to come from Missouri as his bride." Her face crumpled slightly. "I took the train as far as El Paso, then the stage north, but the stage driver said he could not go all the way to Marfa in the storm." He let me off at a way station, said someone would come for me. I waited for hours, but no one came. Finally, I thought I could walk the rest of the way. The man at the station said it was only a few miles. But the snow got worse, and I could not see where I was going, and I think I went the wrong direction entirely. Asher felt anger rise in his chest, hot and fierce. What kind of fool stage driver left a woman alone at a way station in a blizzard? And Samuel Hendricks should have been there waiting for her, storm or no storm. If a man was expecting his bride, he damn well better be there to receive her. Samuel Hendricks owns the mercantile in Marfa, Asher said slowly. I know him. Not well, but I know him. He is a decent enough fellow, I suppose, though I would not call him a friend. Catherine nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. He said in his letters that he owned a business, that he was looking for a wife to help him run it, to make a home with him. I had no other prospects. My parents died last year, both of them within a month of each other from influenza. I have no siblings, no other family. I was living with my aunt in St. Louis, but she made it clear I was a burden. When I saw Mr. Hendricks' advertisement, it seemed like an answer to a prayer. The story was depressingly common. Asher had heard variations of it a dozen times, women fleeing bad situations or simply seeking a better life in the West. Mail-order brides were a necessity in places like Marfa, where women were scarce and men outnumbered them 10 to 1. But that did not make it any less sad, any less desperate. Well, you are safe now, he said, his voice gentler than before. The storm should be clear enough by midday for me to take you into town. Hendricks is probably worried sick. But Catherine's expression had changed, a flicker of something he could not quite read passing across her face. Yes, she said slowly. I suppose he must be. She did not sound particularly eager about it, and Asher felt a twinge of curiosity, but it was not his business. She had come here to marry Samuel Hendricks, and he would deliver her safely to the man. That was all he could do. He made breakfast, simple fare of bacon and eggs and biscuits left over from the day before, and she ate ravenously, as if she had not had a proper meal in days. She probably had not, he realized. Stage food was notoriously bad, and she would have been traveling for at least a week to get here from Missouri. This is wonderful, she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand, then looking embarrassed at the unladylike gesture. I mean, thank you. I have not eaten this well in a long time. You are welcome to it. I am not much of a cook, but I can manage the basics. She looked around the cabin, taking in the rough-hewn furniture, the simple curtains at the windows, the neat but sparse arrangement. You live here alone? Yes, madam. Have for 5 years now, since I started the ranch. I have about 200 head of cattle, a few horses. It is not much, but it is mine. It seems like a good life, she said, and there was wistfulness in her voice that made his chest tighten. It can be lonely, he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. But it is honest work, and I am my own man. That counts for something. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the fire crackling, the wind outside dying down to occasional gusts. Asher found himself acutely aware of her presence, the way the firelight played across her features, the small, graceful movements of her hands as she sipped the coffee he had poured for her. It had been a long time since he had shared his space with anyone, and longer still since that anyone had been a woman. He was 32 years old, had never been married, had never even come close. There had been a girl once, back in Kansas before he came to Texas, but she had married someone else, someone with better prospects and a less wandering spirit. After that, he had thrown himself into building the ranch, into creating something that would last. There had been women along the way, brief encounters in El Paso or San Angelo when he went to sell cattle, but nothing that had touched his heart. He had told himself he was content with solitude, that he did not need anyone else. But watching Catherine now, seeing the way she seemed to blossom in the warmth and safety of his home, he felt something stir inside him that he had thought long dead. It was dangerous, foolish even, to feel this way about a woman who belonged to another man, who had come here specifically to marry someone else. Yet he could not quite shake the feeling that finding her in the snow had been some kind of fate, some design of the universe that he did not yet understand. By noon, the sky had cleared to a brilliant blue, the kind of crystalline winter sky that made everything look sharp and new. The snow had stopped, leaving behind a landscape transformed, white and pristine and beautiful in its harshness. Asher brought Catherine's carpetbag in from where he had retrieved it that morning, and she retreated to the small back room to change into her own clothes. He had dried them by the fire, and though they were wrinkled and worse for wear, they were at least clean and warm when she emerged. She looked every inch the proper lady, her hair pinned up neatly, her dress buttoned to the throat. The transformation made him sad in a way he could not quite articulate. He preferred the way she had looked in his shirt, tousled and natural and somehow more real. "I am ready," she said, her voice steady despite the nervousness in her eyes. They rode double on Copper, Catherine sitting in front of him, his arms around her to hold the reins. It was perhaps more intimate than was strictly proper, but there was no help for it. He only had one horse saddled, and the snow was too deep for her to walk. He tried not to notice the way she fit against him, the faint scent of her hair, the warmth of her body through the layers of clothing. The ride into Marfa took an hour, the snow making the going slow and treacherous. But Copper was sure-footed, and Asher knew every inch of this land, could have found his way blindfolded. As they crested the final rise and the town came into view, a scattered collection of buildings huddled against the vast Texas landscape, he felt Catherine tense in his arms. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said, but her voice was tight. "I am just nervous. It is strange riding to meet a man I have never seen, who I am supposed to marry. If he is not what you expected, if you are not comfortable, you do not have to go through with it," Asher heard himself say. "You always have a choice." She turned her head to look at him, her green eyes searching his face. "Do I? I have no money, no family, nowhere to go. What choice is that?" He wanted to tell her she could stay with him, that he would take care of her, protect her, give her time to figure out what she really wanted. But the words stuck in his throat because he knew how they would sound, what kind of implications they would carry. So he said nothing, just held her a little tighter as they descended into Marfa. The town was quiet under its blanket of snow, smoke rising from chimneys, a few hardy souls out shoveling paths. They drew curious stares as they rode down the main street, a man and woman riding double, and Asher saw curtains twitching at windows, news of their arrival already spreading. Small towns were like that, everyone in everyone else's business. Hendrick's Mercantile was near the center of town, a substantial building that served as general store, post office, and gathering place all in one. Asher reined in Copper out front and dismounted, then helped Catherine down. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed her skirts. The door burst open before they could reach it, and Samuel Hendricks himself came rushing out, his round face red with cold and emotion. He was a portly man in his late 40s, with thinning brown hair and a neatly trimmed beard going gray at the edges. Not an ugly man, but not handsome either, his most distinguishing feature being an air of prosperous respectability. "Miss Owens, Catherine Owens." His voice was higher than Asher expected, almost querulous. "Good God, we thought you were dead. When the stage came through yesterday without you, when they said they had left you at Potter's Way Station, I sent men out to look for you. But the storm was too fierce. They could not get through. Where have you been? Mr. Tanner found me, Catherine said, her voice barely audible. I tried to walk to Marfa when no one came for me. I got lost in the storm. He saved my life. Hendricks turned to Asher as if seeing him for the first time, his expression shifting from concern to something harder to read. Asher Tanner, I should have known. You have quite the reputation for being in the right place at the right time. There was an edge to the words that Asher did not like, an implication he could not quite grasp. I found her half frozen on the road to my ranch, he said evenly. Another 10 minutes and she would have been dead. I did what anyone would have done. And she spent the night at your ranch. Alone with you. Now the implication was crystal clear, and Asher felt his temper rise. She was unconscious and nearly dead from hypothermia, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. I saved her life. If you have something to say about that, Hendricks, say it plain. Catherine stepped between them, her small frame somehow commanding despite her size. Mr. Tanner behaved with perfect propriety and honor. I owe him my life. If you are suggesting otherwise, then you insult not only him but me as well. Hendricks' face reddened further, and for a moment Asher thought the man might push the issue. But then he seemed to deflate slightly, his shoulders sagging. Of course, forgive me, I have been frantic with worry. You must understand, Miss Owens, what a shock this has been. I expected to meet you at the stage depot 2 days ago. When you did not arrive, when no one knew where you were, I feared the worst. Why did you not go to the way station yourself? Asher asked, unable to keep the accusation out of his voice. If you knew where she was, why did you not go get her? The storm came up so suddenly, Hendricks said defensively. By the time I learned where she had been left, it was impossible to travel. I sent my clerk, young Thomas, but even he could not get through. The snow was too deep, the wind too strong. It was a reasonable explanation, Asher supposed, but it still rubbed him wrong. A man should move heaven and earth to get to his bride, should brave any storm, face any danger. But maybe that was just his own foolish romanticism talking. Well, she is here now, safe and sound, Asher said curtly. I will leave you to get acquainted. He turned to go, but Catherine's voice stopped him. Mr. Tanner, wait. He looked back, and she was holding out her hand to him, her green eyes shining with tears. Thank you. I know I already said it, but it does not seem like enough. You saved my life, showed me kindness when I desperately needed it. I will never forget that. He took her hand, feeling the delicate bones, the soft skin, committing the sensation to memory. You are welcome, Miss Owens. I wish you every happiness. The ride back to his ranch felt longer than the ride into town, the landscape emptier, the sky colder. Asher tried to tell himself it was for the best, that Catherine was where she needed to be, with the man she had come to marry. But he could not shake the image of her pale, nervous face, the way she had looked at Hendricks with more resignation than joy. It was not his business. He needed to remember that. The next week passed in a blur of routine work. Asher checked his cattle, repaired fence damaged by the storm, cut firewood, did all the 100 small tasks that kept a ranch running through winter. He went to bed exhausted every night and woke before dawn every morning, and told himself he was not thinking about Catherine Owens, was not wondering how she was faring, whether she had married Hendricks yet, whether she was happy. He was a terrible liar, even to himself. 9 days after he had found her, he rode into Marfa for supplies he did not really need, telling himself it was practical, that he was running low on coffee and flour and lamp oil. But his heart was pounding as he tied copper to the rail outside Hendricks' mercantile, and his hands felt clammy despite the cold. The store was warm and crowded, half a dozen people browsing the shelves or chatting with each other. Hendricks stood behind the counter, measuring out nails for a customer, but there was no sign of Catherine. Asher took his time gathering his supplies, ears straining for the sound of her voice, eyes searching for a glimpse of chestnut hair. He was checking out, handing his money to Hendricks when he finally had to ask, "How is Miss Owens settling in?" Hendricks' expression shuddered immediately. "She is well enough, still adjusting to life here, I suppose. Have you married yet? That is rather forward of you, Tanner." "I saved her life. I figure that gives me the right to make sure she is being properly cared for." Hendricks' jaw tightened. "We will marry as soon as she is ready. She has been through an ordeal. I am giving her time to recover." It was a reasonable answer, but something about the way Hendricks said it set off alarm bells in Asher's mind. Before he could press further, a door at the back of the store opened and Catherine appeared, carrying a crate of canned goods. She was wearing a simple gray dress with a white apron over it, her hair pulled back severely, and she looked thinner than he remembered. Shadows under her eyes, her gaze met his across the crowded store, and her face lit up with such genuine joy that it hit him like a physical blow. She set down the crate and hurried over, her professional demeanor dropping away. "Mr. Tanner, how wonderful to see you, Miss Owens." He touched his hat, acutely aware of Hendricks watching them. "I was just checking that you were settling in all right." "Oh yes," she said, but there was something brittle about her smile, something forced. "Mr. Hendricks has been very kind. I am helping in the store, learning the business." "That is good. That is real good." They stared at each other, 100 unspoken things hanging in the air between them, and Asher had the wild urge to grab her hand, pull her outside, ask her what was wrong because something was definitely wrong. But Hendricks cleared his throat pointedly, and the moment broke. "I should let you get back to work," Asher said. "Yes, but perhaps you could come for supper sometime. I am sure Mr. Hendricks would not mind. It would be nice to thank you properly for everything you did." "I am sure Mr. Tanner is very busy with his ranch," Hendricks interjected smoothly. "He does not have time for social calls." "Actually, I would be pleased to accept," Asher said, his eyes never leaving Catherine's face, "if you are sure it would not be an imposition." "Not at all. Saturday evening, say around 6 o'clock. I will be there." He left the store with his supplies and his heart hammering in his chest, already counting the hours until Saturday. Saturday came with agonizing slowness. Asher bathed, shaved, put on his best clothes, and spent far too long trying to tame his dark hair into some semblance of respectability. He looked at himself in the cracked mirror above his washstand and saw a fool, a man about to sit down to dinner with another man's intended, harboring feelings he had no right to feel. But he saddled Copper anyway and rode into town as the winter sun was setting, painting the snowy landscape in shades of orange and gold. The mercantile was closed for the evening, but a light burned in the upstairs windows where Hendricks had his living quarters. Asher climbed the outside stairs and knocked, and it was Catherine who answered, her face flushed from cooking, her hair escaping its pins in soft tendrils around her face. "You came," she said, and the relief in her voice was unmistakable. "Of course I came. I said I would." She led him into a sitting room that was over-furnished and stuffy, every surface covered with doilies and knickknacks. Hendricks sat in a large armchair, a newspaper spread across his lap, and he looked up at Asher's entrance with an expression that was not quite welcoming. "Tanner." "Punctual, I see. I try to be." Dinner was an awkward affair, the conversation stilted and full of long silences. Catherine had prepared a roast chicken with potatoes and carrots, and it was delicious, but Asher could barely taste it. He was too aware of the tension in the room, The way Hendricks watched him with barely concealed hostility, the way Catherine seemed to shrink into herself whenever Hendricks spoke to her. "So, Tanner, are you thinking of taking a wife yourself?" Hendricks asked as Catherine cleared the plates. "A man in your position should have a helpmate, someone to make a proper home." "I have not given it much thought," Asher said carefully. "You should. It is not natural for a man to live alone. A woman's touch makes all the difference. Why, since Miss Owens arrived, my life has been transformed. The store has never run more smoothly, and I look forward to coming home in the evenings." He reached out and patted Catherine's hand as she set dessert in front of him, and Asher saw her flinch, just slightly, before she covered it with a smile. "Miss Owens seems to have settled in well," Asher said, his eyes on her face. "Oh, she has her uses," Hendricks said jovially, not seeming to notice the way Catherine's jaw tightened at the phrasing. "A bit timid still, needs to develop more backbone for dealing with customers, but she will learn." "I am a patient teacher." Asher wanted to punch the man. The urge was so strong, so visceral, that he had to grip his fork hard enough to make his knuckles white to keep himself in check. Catherine was not a possession to be trained, not a dog to be taught tricks. She was an intelligent, capable woman who deserved to be treated with respect and kindness, not condescension. After dessert, Hendricks excused himself to attend to some paperwork downstairs in the store, leaving Asher and Catherine alone. The moment the door closed behind him, Catherine's composure cracked. She sank into a chair, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Asher was beside her in an instant, kneeling, his hands hovering uncertainly over hers. "Catherine, what is wrong? What has he done?" "Nothing," she gasped out. "He has done nothing. That is the problem. He is kind enough in his way. He has given me a place to live, food to eat, work to do. I have no right to complain. But you are not happy." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, and his heart broke at the misery in her eyes. "How can I be happy when I am living a lie? I came here to marry him, to make a life with him, but every day that passes, I realize more and more that I cannot do it. I do not love him. I do not even like him very much. He treats me like a servant, like something he purchased, and maybe that is all I am, but I hoped it would be different." "Then do not marry him," Asher said fiercely. "Leave. You do not owe him anything." "Where would I go? I have no money, no prospects. I would end up in the same situation, or worse. At least with Mr. Hendricks I have security. You could stay with me." The words were out before he could stop them, hanging in the air between them like something dangerous and precious. Catherine's eyes widened, her mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. "You do not mean that," she whispered. "I do. I know it is forward, I know we barely know each other, but I have not been able to stop thinking about you since I found you in that snow. You are brave and strong and beautiful, and you deserve so much better than Samuel Hendricks treating you like chattel. Come back to my ranch with me. I will give you your own room, no expectations, no pressure. Just a safe place to figure out what you really want. Asher." It was the first time she had used his given name, and it sent a shiver through him. "I cannot. People would talk. My reputation would be ruined. Your reputation will survive, and if it does not, to hell with it. What good is a reputation if you are miserable?" She stared at him for a long moment, conflict playing across her face. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she said, "I want to say yes. God help me, I want to." "Then say it. Say yes. Come with me tonight, right now, before you lose your nerve." "But Mr. Hendricks, he has been expecting. I made a promise." "A promise made under duress is not binding. You thought you had no other choice. Now you do." Footsteps sounded on the stairs, and they sprang apart, Catherine wiping her eyes frantically. By the time Hendricks entered the room, they were a respectable distance apart, though Asher's heart was still racing. I hope I did not leave you two alone too long, Hendricks said, a strange note in his voice. Young women need proper chaperoning, even with trusted friends. I was just leaving, Asher said, standing. He looked at Catherine, trying to convey everything he could not say aloud. Thank you for the lovely meal, Miss Owens. It was truly exceptional. You are welcome, Mr. Tanner. He left, but the image of her tear-stained face haunted him all the way home. 3 days later, he was mending tack in his barn when he heard hoofbeats approaching. He looked up to see a rider coming fast, and his heart leaped when he recognized Catherine's slight form, her dark cloak billowing behind her. She was riding one of the horses from the livery stable, and she looked terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. She practically fell off the horse when she reached him, and he caught her, steadying her. "Catherine, what happened?" "I left," she said breathlessly. "I told him I could not marry him, that I was sorry but I had made a mistake. He was furious, said I was ungrateful, that I owed him for taking me in. We argued, and I said I was coming here, to you. I probably should not have, but I was angry and scared and I just blurted it out. He let you go. He did not have much choice. I am not his wife. He has no legal claim on me, but Asher, he was so angry. He said terrible things. About you, about me, about what people would think. Let them think what they want. You are here now. You are safe." She looked up at him, her green eyes searching his face. "Did you mean it? What you said about giving me time, no expectations? Because I need to know, I need to understand what this is before I can make any decisions." "I meant every word. You can stay as long as you need. I will sleep in the barn if it makes you more comfortable. All I want is for you to be happy and safe." "I do not want you to sleep in the barn," she said softly. "This is your home. I will take the back room and we will be perfectly proper." So began the strangest, sweetest 2 weeks of Asher's life. Catherine settled into his home like she had always been there, bringing order and warmth to spaces that had been purely functional before. She cooked meals that were infinitely better than his clumsy attempts, mended his clothes, even organized his chaotic collection of books and papers. But it was more than that. She talked to him, really talked about her childhood in Missouri, her parents' death, her fears and hopes and dreams. And he found himself opening up in return, telling her things he had never told anyone, about his own childhood, his complicated relationship with his father, his dreams for the ranch. They were careful, so careful to maintain propriety. He never entered the back room without knocking, never touched her beyond what was necessary and appropriate. But there was an intimacy growing between them that had nothing to do with physical touch, a deepening connection that felt more profound than anything he had ever experienced. On the 14th day, they were washing dishes together after supper, her hands in the soapy water, his drying and putting away, when she said quietly, "I think I am falling in love with you." His hand stilled, the plate he was holding nearly slipping from his grasp. "Catherine, I know I should not say it. I know it is too soon, too complicated. But I cannot keep pretending I do not feel it. Every morning I wake up in this house, I feel more at home than I ever have anywhere. Every conversation we have, I learn something new about you that makes me admire you more. You are kind and honest and good, and I think about you constantly." He set down the plate, took the dish towel from his shoulder and gently dried her hands. Then, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he cupped her face in his palms. "I have been in love with you since I found you in the snow. Maybe even before that. Maybe from the moment I saw you lying there and knew I would do anything, move heaven and earth to save you. I have been trying not to pressure you, trying to give you space, but Catherine, I love you. I love everything about you. And if you will have me, if you will take a chance on a rough cowboy with more dreams than money, I will spend the rest of my life making you happy." "Yes," she breathed. Yes, please, yes. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and it felt like coming home, like finding something he had not even known he was searching for. She kissed him back with a fervor that surprised him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. And for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them, the taste of her lips, the feel of her body pressed against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she was smiling, a radiant expression that transformed her entire face. So what do we do now? Now, now I ride into Marfa tomorrow and talk to the preacher about posting the bans. We do this right, proper and legal, so no one can ever say otherwise. People will talk regardless. They will say I am fickle, that I traded Mr. Hendricks for you. Then we will weather it together. I do not care what people say as long as I have you. She kissed him again, briefer this time but no less sweet. I used to think love was something that happened in novels, not in real life. But this, it feels like everything I did not even know I wanted. The next day, Asher rode into Marfa with Catherine beside him, both of them on copper since he still had not returned the rented horse to the livery. They went straight to the small church on the edge of town, where Reverend Milton, a kindly old man with more wisdom than judgment, listened to their story without interruption. I will post the bans, he said when they finished. But I must warn you, there will be talk. Samuel Hendricks has already been spreading rumors, saying that you compromised Miss Owens, Mr. Tanner, that you stole her from him. I did no such thing, Asher said hotly. She made her own choice. I believe you, but others may not be so understanding. Miss Owens, are you certain this is what you want? You are under no obligation to marry Mr. Tanner simply because he sheltered you. Catherine straightened in her chair, her chin lifting in that determined way Asher had come to love. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I am marrying Asher because I love him, because he is a good and honorable man, and because I want to spend my life with him. If people choose to think otherwise, that is their failing, not ours. Reverend Milton smiled. Then I will be honored to perform the ceremony. 3 weeks from today, if that suits you both. They thanked him and left, emerging into the bright winter sunlight. The town was busy, people going about their daily business, and Asher saw the stares, heard the whispers that started as they walked hand in hand down the main street. Let them stare, he thought. Let them whisper. Catherine was his and he was hers, and nothing else mattered. They encountered Samuel Hendricks outside the mercantile, and the man's face darkened when he saw them together. So it is true. You have stolen my bride, Tanner. She was never yours to steal. Catherine is her own person, free to make her own choices. She owes me. I paid her passage from Missouri, gave her room and board, treated her with nothing but kindness. You treated her like a servant, Asher said, his voice low and dangerous. You talked down to her, diminished her, made her feel like she was nothing more than a piece of property. If you had treated her with the respect and care she deserves, maybe things would have turned out differently. But you did not, so here we are. Hendricks turned to Catherine, his face pleading. Is that true? Is that how you felt? I thought we were building something together. Catherine's voice was steady when she answered. I am sorry, Mr. Hendricks. Truly I am. I know I hurt you, and that was not my intention. But I cannot marry someone I do not love, and I do not love you. I love Asher. I am going to marry him, and I hope someday you can forgive me. Forgive you? Hendricks laughed bitterly. You will regret this, both of you. A cowboy with a failing ranch and a faithless woman. You deserve each other. He turned and stalked back into his store, slamming the door behind him, and Asher felt Catherine tremble beside him. He pulled her close, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. He is just hurt and angry. He will get over it. I hope so. I never wanted to cause him pain. You did what you had to do. "Come on, let us go home." The 3 weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Catherine sewed herself a dress, simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, and Asher thought she looked more beautiful in it than any woman in silk and jewels. They made plans for the future, talking late into the night about how they would expand the ranch, maybe add some chickens and a vegetable garden, perhaps eventually build a larger house when they could afford it. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the first day of January 1883, and Asher stood at the front of the little church with his heart in his throat as Catherine walked down the aisle toward him. She had no father to give her away, no family to witness the occasion, but several of the ranch families he knew had come, good people who did not care about gossip, who just wanted to celebrate a marriage. Reverend Milton performed the ceremony with simple dignity, and when Asher slipped the gold band onto Catherine's finger, a simple thing he had bought with money he could not really spare, he felt like the richest man in the world. She slipped a matching band onto his finger, her hand steady, her eyes shining with tears, and when the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, the kiss they shared was everything a first kiss as husband and wife should be. The reception was held in the church hall, a potluck affair where the women had brought their best dishes, and the men had contributed a keg of beer. It was not fancy, but it was warm and full of good wishes, and Asher looked around at the assembled guests and felt a rush of gratitude for this community that had accepted them. As evening fell and they prepared to leave, Catherine threw her small bouquet of winter roses, and it was caught by Jenny Franklin, the blacksmith's daughter, who blushed furiously to the delight of all assembled. They rode home through the crisp winter night, both of them giddy with happiness and more than a little nervous about what came next. That night, in the privacy of Asher's room, now their room, Catherine came to him with trembling hands and fierce determination. "I am nervous," she admitted. "I do not know what to expect." "Neither do I, truth be told," he said, pulling her close. "But we will figure it out together. We do not have to rush anything." "I do not want to wait," she said, looking up at him with such trust and love that it took his breath away. "I want to be your wife in every way. I want to start our life together tonight." So they did, fumbling and nervous at first, but gradually finding their way together. It was nothing like the crude stories Asher had heard from ranch hands, nothing like the mechanical encounters he had experienced before. This was sacred, intimate, a physical manifestation of the love they felt, and when Catherine cried out his name and clung to him, he felt a sense of completion he had not known was possible. Afterward they lay tangled together in the darkness, her head on his chest, his fingers trailing through her hair. "I love you," she murmured. "I love you so much it scares me. Do not be scared. I am right here and I am not going anywhere. This is forever, Catherine. You and me, for as long as we both shall live." "Forever," she echoed, and in her voice he heard the same certainty he felt in his own heart. The first year of their marriage was not easy. The ranch required constant work, and money was tighter than Asher liked to admit. There were nights when they went to bed hungry so the cattle could be fed, mornings when Catherine had to melt ice for washing because the pump had frozen. But there was also laughter, joy, moments of simple happiness that made every hardship worthwhile. Catherine proved to be far more capable than anyone, including herself, had anticipated. She learned to ride, to rope, to help with the cattle. She started her vegetable garden as soon as the ground thawed, and by summer they had fresh vegetables to supplement the monotonous diet of beef and beans. She made friends with the neighboring ranch wives, women who taught her the skills she would need to survive in this harsh land. By late summer, Catherine began to feel unwell, plagued by nausea and exhaustion. At first, She thought she had eaten something bad, but as the weeks passed and her monthly courses failed to appear, the truth became undeniable. She was pregnant. She told Asher one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the vast Texas landscape. He had been talking about needing to buy a new bull, and she interrupted him mid-sentence. "Asher, I am going to have a baby." He froze, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth, and then a slow smile spread across his face, so full of joy it made her heart swell. "A baby, Catherine, are you certain?" "As certain as I can be. I have all the signs. I think I am about 3 months along. The baby should come in early spring." He set down his coffee and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "We are going to be parents. I am going to be a father." "Catherine, this is the best news, the absolute best." The pregnancy was difficult. Catherine was sick for months, unable to keep much food down, losing weight despite the baby growing inside her. Asher worried constantly, hovering over her until she snapped at him to give her space. But as winter gave way to early spring, the sickness finally eased, and she began to bloom, her belly swelling, her face taking on that radiant glow he had heard pregnant women got. In late March, on a night when the first wildflowers were beginning to push through the warming earth, Catherine went into labor. Asher rode like the devil himself was chasing him to fetch Mrs. Henderson, the midwife who lived 5 miles away, and then spent the longest night of his life pacing outside while Catherine labored. The baby, when he finally arrived just after dawn, was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a shock of dark hair, and lungs that worked spectacularly well based on the volume of his cries. Asher held his son for the first time and felt something fundamental shift inside him, a fierce protective love that dwarfed even what he felt for Catherine. "What should we name him?" Catherine asked, exhausted but glowing with happiness. "I was thinking Andrew," Asher said. "Andrew James Tanner, after my father and yours. Andrew James, I love it. Hello, Andrew. Welcome to the world, little one." The next few years were the happiest of Asher's life. Andrew grew from a screaming infant into a toddler, then a small boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn determination. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily, as Asher's hard work and careful management paid off. They were never rich, but they were comfortable, able to afford small luxuries, to plan for the future with confidence. When Andrew was 3, Catherine gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Daniel and Emma. The house was suddenly chaotic, full of noise and laughter and the organized chaos that came with 3 small children. Asher built an addition, 2 more bedrooms and a proper kitchen, working through the long summer evenings while Catherine wrangled the children. By the time Andrew was 10, Daniel and Emma 8, the ranch had grown to 500 head of cattle and a dozen horses. Asher had hired 2 permanent hands, young men who lived in the bunkhouse he had built near the barn, and during roundup and branding season, he employed a dozen more. The Tanner Ranch was known throughout the county as a well-run operation, and Asher's opinion was sought on everything from breeding stock to water rights. But it was not the success of the ranch that mattered most to him. It was the life he had built with Catherine, the family they had created together. Every night when he came in from work, tired and dirty and smelling of cattle and sweat, she would greet him with a kiss and a smile that made everything worthwhile. Every morning when he woke with her beside him, he thanked God for the blizzard that had brought her into his life. On their 20th wedding anniversary, they hosted a barbecue at the ranch, inviting everyone they knew. The children, now young adults, helped prepare the food and set up tables in the yard. Andrew, tall and serious at 23, was already managing much of the daily ranch operations. Daniel and Emma, 21 and inseparable despite being fraternal twins, were both preparing to head to college in the fall, Daniel to study veterinary medicine, Emma to become a teacher. As the sun set and the guests mingled, Asher found Catherine standing alone near the corral, watching the horses. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, and she leaned back against him with a contented sigh. "Do you ever think about how different your life would have been if I had not found you that day?" he asked quietly. "All the time. I would have married Mr. Hendricks, been miserable, probably died young and unfulfilled. Or I would have died in that snow and none of this would exist. I prefer this version. So do I." She turned in his arms to face him, and he was struck as always by how beautiful she was, even at 45, even with lines around her eyes and silver threading through her hair. "You saved my life that day, Asher, in more ways than one. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love when I had given up hope of ever finding it. You saved me too. I did not even know how lonely I was until you came along. I thought I was content living alone, but I was just surviving, not living. You taught me the difference." They kissed, slow and sweet, and around them the party continued, their children and friends celebrating 2 decades of a marriage that had started in the snow and grown into something beautiful and lasting. Several years later, Asher and Catherine sat on the expanded porch of their ranch house, which had grown considerably over the decades. They were in their 60s now, their hair more gray than brown, their bodies bearing the marks of a life lived hard and well. Andrew ran the ranch with his wife, Maria, and their 4 children. Daniel had indeed become a veterinarian, practicing in Marfa and serving ranches throughout the county. Emma taught at the school in town, married to a banker, mother of 3. "We have been blessed," Catherine said, watching her grandchildren play in the yard, their shrieks of laughter carrying on the warm breeze. "More blessed than I ever dreamed possible." "Do you remember that first night?" Asher asked. "When I brought you here, barely alive, wrapped in blankets?" "I remember everything. The warmth of the fire, the way you looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth saving. I was so scared, so lost, and you gave me hope. I could not let you die. Even unconscious, even half frozen, there was something about you that called to me. I knew even then that you were meant to be mine." "Fate," Catherine said softly. "That is what it was. The blizzard, getting lost, you finding me exactly when you did. It was all fate bringing us together. I do not believe in fate. I believe we make our own choices, our own luck. But I will admit, the timing was awfully convenient," she laughed, the sound rich and full of joy. "You old romantic, you never could admit that maybe, just maybe, there are forces at work beyond our control. If there are, then I am grateful to them. For bringing you to me, for giving me a reason to be better than I was." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The land stretched out before them, harsh and beautiful, the same land where their story had begun all those years ago. "Do you know what I thought about, lying in that snow?" Catherine asked suddenly. "I thought about how unfair it was to die before I had really lived. I had spent my whole life being careful, doing what was expected, and I was dying alone in a blizzard, going to meet a man I did not know. And I thought, if I survive this, if I somehow make it through, I will live differently. I will choose joy, choose love, choose life. And did you? Every single day. Every day I spent with you has been a choice, a deliberate decision to embrace whatever came, good or bad. And I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." Asher reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of decades of practice. "I love you, Catherine Tanner. I loved you when I pulled you from that snow. I loved you when I married you. I loved you through every trial and triumph. And I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you, Asher Tanner, my cowboy, my hero, my home." As the sun set on another day in West Texas, they sat together, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life and a legacy from nothing but love and determination. The blizzard that had nearly killed Catherine had instead given them both the greatest gift imaginable, a chance at true happiness, a love story for the ages. And if sometimes, on cold winter nights when the wind howled and snow fell, they would sit by the fire and tell their grandchildren the story of how Grandma almost died in a blizzard, and Grandpa saved her, refusing to let her go, the children would listen with wide eyes and ask if it was really true. And Asher and Catherine would smile at each other, that secret smile of two people who had shared a lifetime, and say, yes, every word of it is true. Love finds you when you least expect it, in the most unlikely places, and if you are brave enough to reach for it, it will transform your entire world. Their story became legend in Marfa, passed down through generations, a tale of love conquering hardship, of second chances and the power of refusing to give up. Long after they were both gone, their descendants would walk the land they had built together, tend the cattle that bore the Tanner brand, and remember the mail-order bride who collapsed in the snow and the cowboy who saved her, who loved her so fiercely he refused to ever let her go. Years rolled by in the gentle rhythm of ranch life, each season bringing its own challenges and rewards. When Asher was 75 and Catherine 72, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with a gathering that brought together over 100 people, family and friends spanning 3 generations. The ranch house, expanded multiple times over the decades, was filled with laughter and music and the warm chaos of a family deeply rooted in love. Andrew gave a speech that night, standing on the porch with his parents seated in chairs of honor beside him. "My father once told me that the day he found my mother in the snow was the day his real life began. Everything before that was just preparation, just waiting for the moment when he would meet the woman who would change everything. And my mother told me that being saved by my father was not just about being pulled from a blizzard. It was about being seen, truly seen for the first time in her life, being valued, being loved unconditionally. That is what they have given each other for 50 years and what they have taught all of us. Love is not just a feeling. It is a choice, made every single day, through good times and hard times, through prosperity and struggle. It is refusing to let go, even when letting go would be easier." Catherine wept openly, and Asher held her hand, his own eyes bright with tears. They had built something remarkable, not just in terms of land and cattle and financial success, but in terms of human connection, of lives touched and changed by their example. As the party wound down and the guests departed, Asher and Catherine found themselves alone on the porch once more, the stars brilliant overhead, the night air cool and sweet. Catherine rested her head on Asher's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. 50 years, she murmured. Half a century. Where did the time go? Into this, he said, gesturing at the house behind them, the land around them, the distant lights of the bunkhouse where Andrew and his family now lived. Into building something that will last long after we are gone. I used to be so afraid, back at the beginning. Afraid I had made the wrong choice, afraid you would regret taking me in, afraid I was not strong enough for this life. And now I know that fear was wasted energy. We were always meant to find each other, always meant to build this life together. Every hardship we faced together. Every joy we celebrated together. That is what marriage is supposed to be. They sat in peaceful silence for a long while, comfortable in the way only two people who had shared a lifetime could be. Finally, Catherine spoke again, her voice soft. "When my time comes, I want you to know that I have no regrets. None. Every moment with you has been a gift." "Do not talk like that," Asher said gruffly. "You have plenty of years left in you yet." "Maybe. But we are not young anymore, my love. We have to face reality. And the reality is, I want you to be prepared. I want you to know that I died happy, fulfilled, surrounded by love. That is more than most people get. When that day comes, and may it be far in the future, I will remember. But for now, let us focus on the life we still have to live. We have grandchildren to spoil, great-grandchildren to meet, anniversaries still to celebrate. You are right, as always. I am just feeling sentimental tonight, thinking about everything we have been through." "Sentimental is allowed on your 50th anniversary. Come on, let us go to bed. It has been a long day." They rose together, moving with the careful coordination of people whose bodies no longer obeyed as readily as they once had, and made their way inside. Their bedroom was on the ground floor now, stairs having become too difficult several years back, and it was a cozy space filled with photographs and mementos of their life together. As they prepared for bed, following the comfortable routine they had perfected over decades, Asher found himself overwhelmed with gratitude, not just for the big things, the children and grandchildren and the successful ranch, but for the small things. The way Catherine hummed while she brushed her hair, the way she always kissed him goodnight, even after 50 years, the way she fit perfectly against him when they lay down, her back to his chest, his arm around her waist. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," she replied, her voice already drowsy. "Thank you for saving me all those years ago. Thank you for letting me." They drifted off to sleep together as they had thousands of times before, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Asher lived to be 82 years old, active and engaged right up until the end. He died peacefully in his sleep on a cool October morning, Catherine beside him, their children and many of their grandchildren gathered at the ranch for Sunday dinner. It was, everyone agreed, exactly the kind of death he would have wanted, surrounded by family on the land he loved, with the woman he had loved for 57 years holding his hand. Catherine mourned him deeply, but without despair. She had known, when she married him that snowy January day in 1883, that one of them would eventually have to say goodbye to the other. She had hoped, selfishly perhaps, that she would be the first to go, that she would not have to face life without him. But fate, or God, or whatever force governed such things, had decided otherwise. She lived for 3 more years, spending her days surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling stories of Asher, of their life together, of the blizzard that had brought them together, and the love that had sustained them through everything that came after. She walked the ranch every day, visiting all the places that held memories, talking to Asher as if he were still beside her. On a cold December morning, almost exactly 60 years after Asher had found her in the snow, Catherine Tanner passed away in her sleep. She was 85 years old, and her last words, spoken to Emma who was sitting with her, were, "Tell your father I am coming home. Tell him I never let go and I never will." They buried her next to Asher in the small cemetery on the ranch, under a spreading oak tree they had planted together on their 10th anniversary. The headstone was simple, just their names and dates and a single line Asher had chosen years before. "Together forever, from snow to stars." The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, each new Tanner adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the legacy of the couple who had started it all. The tale of the mail-order bride who collapsed in the snow and the cowboy who refused to let her go became family legend, told and retold, embellished and refined, until it took on an almost mythical quality. But at its heart, it remained a simple story. A story of love found in the most unlikely circumstances, of two people who chose each other every single day, of a life built on mutual respect, deep affection, and unwavering commitment. It was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that love, real love, was worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth refusing to let go of no matter what obstacles stood in the way. And on cold winter nights, when snow fell over West Texas and the wind howled around the old ranch house, some swore they could see two figures walking hand in hand through the drifts. A tall cowboy and a small woman with chestnut hair, still together, still in love, still refusing to let go. Even death itself could not separate them. It was probably just a trick of the light, a product of overactive imaginations and too much whiskey. But maybe, just maybe, it was something more. Maybe it was proof that some loves are so strong, so true, they transcend even the boundaries between this world and the next. The Tanner Ranch still stands today, over a century after Asher first built it, still run by his descendants, still bearing the mark of his hard work and Catherine's gentle influence. And in Marfa, Texas, the story of the mail-order bride and the cowboy is still told, a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a single act of courage, a refusal to give up, a determination to save a life even when it seems impossible. Because in the end, that is what love is. It is refusing to let go. It is holding on through the storms, through the hardships, through the moments when letting go would be easier. It is choosing every single day to fight for the person who holds your heart. And if you are very, very lucky, you find someone who fights just as hard for you, who refuses to let go even when you are telling them to, who saves you not just once but over and over again, in 1,000 small ways for the rest of your life. That is what Asher gave Catherine when he pulled her from that snow. That is what Catherine gave Asher when she chose him over safety and convention. And that is what they gave the world through their life together, a shining example of what love can be when two people refuse to let go, no matter what. Their story lives on, whispered in the wind that sweeps across the West Texas plains, written in the stars that shine over the ranch they built together, carved into the hearts of every person who has ever heard it and believed, even for a moment, that true love really does exist, that it really can conquer everything, that it really is worth holding on to with everything you have got. And somewhere, beyond the veil that separates this world from whatever comes next, a cowboy and his bride walk hand in hand through fields of endless summer, where no snow ever falls and no cold can touch them, but where they remember with fondness and gratitude the blizzard that brought them together and the warmth they created in its wake. They remember the struggle and the joy, the hardship and the triumph, the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones. And they know with absolute certainty that they would do it all again, exactly the same way, because finding each other was worth every trial, every tear, every moment of doubt. That is the gift of love. That is the legacy of Catherine and Asher Tanner. That is the story that began on a frozen Texas road in December of 1882 and continues still, passed down through generations, inspiring others to hold on, to refuse to let go, to believe that somewhere out there, their own love story is waiting to begin, perhaps in the most unlikely place, at the most unexpected moment, when they are ready to be saved and ready to save in return.